Welcome back to the Mission43 Podcast. Today we have Cole Petrie. He's the brand new CEO of Higher Ground, an amazing nonprofit organization out of the Wood River Valley here in Idaho that serves military veterans, military spouses, and first responders through outdoor recreational therapeutic offerings. It's a really cool group, and they've been in our sphere for quite some time. Cole was a Navy SEAL. I'm not quite sure what that is, but we're going to find out. Here we go. Welcome to the Mission43 Podcast, a podcast dedicated to discussing the struggles and triumphs of transitioning to life after the military. I'm Dan Nelson. I'm a former Army Special Forces officer who's personally experienced the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. In every episode, we'll be sharing tips, strategies, and real-life stories of veterans and their families who've chosen Idaho for their life after the military. So join us, and let's start the conversation. All right, Cole Petrie, new Executive Director, CEO of Higher Ground. Thanks for being here, man.
Hey, thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's awesome. I heard you guys do great stuff at Mission43, and excited to be a part of Higher Ground.
Well, it's been years now that we've been unofficial partners, I guess, in a way. We both serve similar demographics, and we both have both adaptive athletes and veterans, and then crossover athletes that we've been serving here in the state of Idaho, mutual friends in CAF Idaho. Our sister organization and, Adaptive Training Foundation, Dave Abora and those guys from Texas. There's a lot of overlap, right? But we're glad to have you here and glad that you're the one running this show at Higher Ground.
Yeah, I'm super thankful. We actually just did an event with ATF out in Ketchum. They came out for mountain biking, and those guys ripped around on bikes. It was impressive.
Yeah.
A cool group.
Everyone has their own level of risk acceptance when they're doing these crazy sports things. ATF, not like the we're going to steal your guns, ATF, you know what I mean? But it's like Adaptive Training Foundation. Those guys have a high tolerance for risk.
They do, yeah. So we got a lot of hand cycles, but with those you can throttle. So there's a motor on them, and those people throttle the majority of the time, which we try to say, hey, don't throttle, slow down a little bit. But those guys rip, and it was cool to see. Well,
it's awesome that you guys do that, and you've helped us out a lot. My very first event with Mission43 and CAF was a biathlon clinic in 2019. And it was Higher Ground that brought the crew. Higher Ground brings the crew to help us out with sled hockey. I don't know how many times, having Higher Ground show up when we have our Leaders Fellowship events there at Adams Gulch in the Wood River Valley. But you're coming down here in Boise, Idaho, but you're living up in the Sun Valley area, right?
Yeah, living up there. So I moved there in May. Okay. My wife and son, we live in Bellevue.
Oh, cool.
So just south of Ketchum and Haley.
It's all the same now. It's all growing,
It's all the same, but I love Bellevue. It's a cute little town.
It is.
It's quiet, which is so nice, and a huge change from San Diego, Coronado. So
yeah,
it's great.
Well, I don't know, we might as well get into it now, but how did you get here? Because you spent time in the Navy before this. Is this your first actual job out of the Navy?
Out of the Navy, yes. First real job out of the Navy. I worked out of college. I was a commercial real estate agent for a little bit, but this is my first legit job out of the Navy, and I've been out now for a month, so I'm brand new.
Oh, my God, really?
Out of the Navy, yeah.
So it's just happening now.
Just happening.
And you move right into a role as CEO. I think a lot of people will be really interested because there's a lot of folks, like me, that are like, oh, I'm going to get out of the military and move into an executive director role of some kind, and that is not the case, but it is for you.
Yeah, no, that's true. Up first, I'd say God is sovereign over everything, and I look back at events in my life and things that have happened, and at the time, been like, oh man, why is this going on? Why is this happening? And the stars aligned for this one, and it's been a great opportunity. I couldn't be happier.
Where are you from originally?
Yeah, so I grew up in Portland, Oregon, so a suburb, Lake Oswego.
Oh yeah.
So first, I'm married to my wonderful wife, Bridget, and we got a 10-month-old son who's just amazing, biggest smile I've ever seen. But grew up in Portland, Oregon, great family, supportive family, and a younger brother who's 2 years younger. He's actually up in the valley with me right now. So
That's cool.
He's working on the Seattle Ridge chairlift with Doppelmayr, so they're replacing the lift. So anyone listening or to you, just be careful on Seattle Ridge this winter.
You've been warned.
Yeah,
you signed the waiver. You're good.
My brothers warned me, hey, just be careful. Know that I was cranking on those bolts up there. So
was he in the military too?
He was not. No,
okay.
He was not in the military.
Well, tell us about your military service then. You chose then the Navy, but you went to college first.
Yeah, so I went to Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. Mm-hmm. After school, was a commercial real estate agent in Denver for a year. Mm-hmm. And the story I tell everyone asks, how'd you go from commercial real estate to the Navy. And the story I tell is this guy, Trent, came in the office every day. He was like 60 years old, stressed out of his mind, pulling his hair out. And I remember sitting there in my cube being like, that's going to be me in 40 years if I don't do something else. So I had some family friends that were team guys. I kind of always thought about it and ended up going to what's called SOAS, SEAL Officer Assessment Selection. And that's the process you have to go through to get a officer contract or billet to go to BUDS. So it's a week long of BUDS type training. So for me, I was working my civilian white collar job on Friday, showed up to Coronado on Sunday, and was getting my ass kicked on Monday.
Were you an athlete before that, like in college at TCU or anything? Or?
No, I was just a guy that worked hard.
Okay.
So I don't have a history in sports. Played football and wrestled in high school growing up, and then in college was just a student and in a fraternity. So
there you go.
Just a guy that knew how to work hard, and I think that was instilled in me from a young age from my parents.
Yeah.
So just knew how to work hard.
But it worked out for you then, huh?
I got super lucky. What's nice about being in Denver prior to going to Coronado is I had about 5,000 feet on everyone else that was there. So I felt like I had iron lungs, and It worked out. So I ended up joining the Navy in 2015 and went to BUDS in 2016. I was in class 319. So BUDS is Basic Underwater Demolition School. Was in class 319, got rolled in Hell Week, and then, which, at the time I was pretty bummed about, but again.
It's a significant event for people.
Yeah, it was Wednesday at noon, just after lunch, got rolled. And that was tough. But looking back, one of the best things that ever happened. So made it all the way through with class 321, went to SQT, SEAL qualification training, and graduated in 2017. So
it's really not that long ago. Like, do you mind if I ask how old you are?
Yeah, I'm 32. I know I got a baby face. I probably need to grow a beard. It's about time. But yeah, I'm 32. Got the baby face going. So.
Well, I mean, 32 is pretty young to be, a CEO of something as big and as significant as Higher Ground. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
But also you came from, I don't know what rank you were when you got out, but you obviously had some pretty significant experiences while you were in.
Yeah, so I had great experiences while I was in, and, kind of leading into that. So I loved being gone. Like, I loved being a team guy.
Yeah.
And I was single at the time, hadn't met my wife, and I just loved being gone and being on trips. And in my first 2 years in the teams, I augmented 3 times and deployed once, and just loved every minute of it. Yeah. So I have great experience from that, and then also some great leaders along the way that have taught me a lot, that have allowed me to be in this position. So super thankful for that.
And then did you get married while you're still in?
I did. I got married in 2021. So quick story, my wife, she shut me down at a bar real hard in 2016, Moonshine Flats.
I have lots of those stories being shut down everywhere.
Me too. So 2016, Moonshine Flats, my wife shut me down so hard. So we were always around each other's friends group, and I always told everyone, like, hey, stay away from her. She's a flirt. And she told everyone, stay away from him. He's super standoffish. So we ended up matching on Hinge years later, and she actually liked a picture or whatever of mine. I was like, dang, she's still interested. And I was talking to a buddy last night, and he's like, yeah, man, you just got that never quit in you.
Yeah, there you go.
I finally convinced my now wife to start dating me. So, yeah, it worked out.
I'm pretty sure you might be the first SEAL on the podcast here. And I'm just curious. So how many books have you written? How many movies have you starred in or co-produced? How many podcasts have you done?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like we talked about earlier, if you would have told me 2 years ago, like, hey, Cole, you're going to be on a podcast talking about the nonprofit you work for, I'd be like, get out of here. Like, you're crazy. I was super hesitant coming on this podcast and want to make sure I represent my community well and the guys well, as well as Higher Ground. But yeah, I haven't written any books, don't plan to, but I'm always a supporter of getting out and talking about Higher Ground and my experience.
It's new things, and I truly appreciate your desire to, represent the community and, be a quiet professional. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's reputations that come with both groups, mine too. All of our groups have different things, but it's pretty cool to see guys that take it to heart, you know what I mean? And do their absolute best to represent it in a positive manner. So nothing but respect for that, even though I'm going to give you crap constantly. But
let's go. Well deserved. So,
well, I don't know about that. So at 32 now, you're this, what in your background, because you're a real estate and then, you were a naval officer, a SEAL officer, what in your background prepared you or got you thinking about work in the nonprofit sector?
Yeah. So I wasn't thinking about the nonprofit sector really at all when I was transitioning out of the military. It wasn't really on my radar. So kind of the story of how I got into Higher Ground, I think I was on Skillbridge. It was like 2 or 3 weeks before I was getting out of the military. My wife and I already decided we were going to move up to the Wood River Valley. And my mom forwarded me an email. So shout out to my mom. But that Higher Ground was looking for an executive director. So I ended up cold calling the chairman of the board. And his first questions were, who are you and how'd you get my phone number? Because his phone number wasn't anywhere.
It's a good start.
So in my head, I was like, all right, this is not going to work out. But I told him, like, I was in commercial real estate. I can find pretty much anyone's phone number. And he's like, all right, just send me your resume and I'll take a look. So I sent him my resume and then started going through the interview process. My second interview was a Zoom interview with some board members. And I was sitting in my car, had my phone propped up on my steering wheel, because they were packing up my apartment in Coronado to move out here.
Yep.
So that was great. And then Monday, my brother and I caravanned up here to Idaho. We left at like 3 a.m. to get out of Southern California traffic. And about 9 a.m., I get a phone call from my prior boss that I did Skillbridge with. He, prior team guy, builds custom homes in Coronado.
Cool.
Like super squared away dude. But he's like, hey, I just got a phone call from Tom, and there's actually a relationship there. His son, Tom's son, who's on our board, was roommates with my prior boss in Skillbridge.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, or his brother. So there's a connection there. So anyways, he's like, yeah, Tom reached out to me and, was asking about you. And, I think everything went well. So I was like, all right, that's cool. Glad the board's doing their research. About 2 hours later, I get another phone call. This is from a guy I worked with in the Navy. He was our program manager. I actually ran SEAL officer assessment selection my last 2 years in the Navy.
Oh, okay.
So he reached out to him. So I get a call from him 2 hours later as I'm driving. Hey, Cole, yeah, this guy Tom reached out and had a bunch of questions about you. And I talked to him for like about an hour. I was like, holy cow.
They do their homework.
And then I get another phone call from my prior CO, 06, working, I think, in DC now. And he's like, hey, Cole, this guy Tom called asking about you. And I was like, dang, they're doing their research. This is awesome. So I ended up getting up to the valley and had a handful of lunch interviews along the way. So got to meet the rest of the board, a bunch of staff members. And something that really stuck out was, one, the passion that the staff has and that there's not a lot of turnover. And I was like, dang, that's pretty special for an organization like this. And number two was the passion for the board. I'd never felt that anywhere. And you could tell that everyone on the board that I met with was super passionate about Higher Ground. I was like, okay, I think this is going to be a good fit. And the fact that they're passionate about it says a lot about the organization. So was super excited to get involved.
It's super cool. It seems like, it's not a family-run organization, but it kind of seems like that from the outsider's perspective, that the same people have been there, like you said, forever, because they're vested in its success and invested in trying to help the people you're trying to help. But I'm curious because, our mission is to, as Mission43 at least, is to, in part, make Idaho the premier destination for military families after their service, right? Life after the military. How did you guys settle on the Wood River Valley? To back up a little bit, you said you were moving up here before your mom even emailed you this job.
Yeah, totally.
Higher Ground, they do a lot of good homework, obviously. But they kind of lucked out with you saying you're already moving up there, right?
Yeah, totally. And that goes back for me, just God is sovereign with it. So my wife and I found out I was getting out March of 23. So in June of that year, my wife and I, backing up, hey, we wanted to live close to one set of parents. My wife's parents are in Minnesota, mine are here in Idaho. Okay. And I told my wife, Bridget, I was like, we're not going to Minnesota. Let's go. Let's go
no
up to the mountain.
To Minnesota people,
no offense.
I
love Minnesota. I love my in-laws. I love going up there. People are so nice. Minnesota nice is a real thing.
It is nice.
But I was like, all right, let's go to Idaho. So we came up. I think the first thing we did was drove up, went to the Mackey Rodeo, which if you haven't been, is the best rodeo in the country, in my opinion. So went to the Mackey Rodeo, ended up buying a house up here, and knew we were going to move up here for about a year prior to moving. So that's how we settled on the Wood River Valley.
It's a hell of a place to settle. It's really nice.
It's super nice. I love it. I go trail running 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
There's so much to do: fly fishing, mountain biking, skiing, and it's in terms of therapeutic recreation, it's probably one of the best places that you could do it.
Well, I think that's why Higher Ground started there, headquartered there, right?
Yeah.
It is for a bunch of different reasons, but certainly it's a mecca for outdoor recreation and recreational therapy.
100%. So our history of Higher Ground, this is our 25th year in operations, which is an awesome milestone. And we're really looking forward to the next 25 years. But we actually started as Sun Valley Adaptive Sports. So Sun Valley is the big organization up there. They have a big lodge. They own the mountain or run the mountain. Yeah. And we were their adaptive sports programming in the winter. And we started out with that. We eventually changed to Sun Valley Adaptive Sports and Higher Ground, which Higher Ground was our veteran part of the organization. And then in like 2004, 2005, ended up merging both and just became Higher Ground. So we still do all the adaptive programming for Sun Valley on Bald Mountain. And we also have programs every day of the summer and winter for the adaptive community up there in the Wood River Valley. And then we serve veterans nationally as well. So we got 27 week-long veteran programs and first responder programs, which is a new demographic that we're serving.
When did that change?
Yeah, pretty recently. I'd say the last year or so. And coming from the military background, if you look at kind of how you can ramp up and mentally prepare for a deployment, you have this ramp up in your workout and then you're deployed. And so you're on 24/7 and you're like, you're in it. You're kind of living a little grungy. You're getting big in the gym, but you can like ramp up and stay at that high pace for a long time. And then, as you come back down, you're about to go back home. You're like, okay, I can, take my cape off, if you will, and be a dad, father, whatever you're. And with the first responder community, which is way different, is their deployment cycle is 24 hours. Yeah. So they go on for 8, 10 hour, 12 hour shift. So they're ramping up and then they ramp back down and have to come home that same day and be a dad, a father, the baseball coach. And so they're in this constant up and down. It's almost like being an ER nurse. So
you're speaking my language now. So I was a cop here for a while.
Oh, you were after the service?
No,
before.
In between. So I left active duty in 2011, and then I did the 19th group thing from 2011, 2016.
Yep.
And I was also with Idaho State Police here. And that's a big thing for me. You just touched on it, but for me, that's a huge thing that I never appreciated the value of the flight or the float. You know what I mean? Like in between deployments or whatever, that separation was really nice. But the folks that are still doing those jobs all over the state, all over the country, like they got to drive home. That's it. And then they sit in their driveway and have to shake off whatever it is that they dealt with that day.
Yeah.
And then also it's different because you take your kids to a movie and you're like, I know exactly what shitty thing happened right there that we drove by. It's hard to get away from.
Yeah, 100%.
It's not exactly like going back and forth to Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever.
Yeah, when you travel overseas and come back, it's so easy to disassociate it.
Yeah.
But when you're home and like you said, you're at the movie theater and you saw something bad there last week, it's hard to get away from that. And I think, I don't have studies on this, but I'd say that the first responder community is where the military was 20 years ago in terms of getting support. Yeah. It's kind of, has a bad connotation with it. And we're, as the military now, it's like talking with the psych is okay. Like everyone's like, hey, go talk to the psychs. As you know, the suicide rate from the military with active duty personnel and veterans, I think there's a 2020 study from the VA, about 17 people, kill themselves every day. And that's, it's tough.
It's a big thing that we, like Higher Ground, like we're really big into holistic healing, right? And it doesn't mean, because it's not just enough, like you get out of the military, you need a job, right? But it's not just enough to get someone a good job to make them better. Like what about their family? What about their fitness? What about their mental health? What about, their education or their wife's education or their husband's education, their military spouses in this, you know what I mean? I know you guys have programs because I've been to one, not as a participant, unfortunately, but just as someone that enjoyed watching and meeting some of the crew that was a military spouse retreat up there in Sun Valley. It's a damn nice place to have a retreat.
It is, yeah. And that's something special about Higher Ground is we bring on spouses and supporters of the veterans where, they get a lot of the relief as well. And we just had some participants at our fundraiser and the wife spoke the whole time and was because that she could attend our program, it helped the veteran and it helped her. And just to see that was awesome.
Have you always been like an outdoorsy type of guy or a sportsman? Are you big into hunting, fishing, all things outdoors?
Yeah, so I'm a novice hunter. Okay. The only time I've been hunting was in college. I was in a deer blind. And
Texas hunting is a lot different than what we do up here.
Texas hunting is about as canned as it gets. So we sat in a deer blind. The feed would go off. the hogs would go to the feed. And so our job was to, get rid of the hogs.
Yeah.
One of the most shocking parts to that is we'd drag them out to a field and the vultures would eat the hogs and they'd be gone in a day. So those vultures were pretty stout themselves.
Well-fed, yeah.
Well-fed
Don't
vouchers.
mess with the vultures.
Yeah, so I've been skiing it every day, or not every day, I've been skiing since I was 2. My dad was on the ski patrol at Mount Hood for like 26 years, so been a big skier, getting into fly fishing, but love the outdoors.
Yeah.
And, in terms of recreational therapy, so I had a quick, kind of an abrupt ending to an deployment in 2019, and I'm sure like you, but they make you sit down with the psych after you get home and no, big tough Navy SEAL, especially my first deployment, wants to sit down with the psych. So I go in there and I was like, okay, let's just get through this hour. And I think I'm doing a good job deflecting her questions. I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's get this on.
Stay in your circle.
Yeah, stay in my circle. Yeah, SEER school.
Yeah.
And then she asked me a question. She's like, what do you do for fun? And in my head, I was like, that's easy. And I told her, I was like, I work out. She's like, no, working out puts stress on your body. What do you do for fun? And I sat there for what felt like 15 minutes, but it was probably just 30 seconds of dead silent, just staring at the ground. And, in my head, I was like, oh, no, she got me. So I look up finally, I was like, nothing. And she said, you need to get out and do something outside for fun that takes your mind off of work, family life, everything. And so I didn't know it at the time, but that was recreational therapy is what she was, basically suggesting that I do. So for those familiar with Southern California, I went to Costco. I got a $100 Wavestorm surfboard, which is a foam surfboard, 8 foot long. And I'm not a good surfer by any means, but I made it a priority to go out as many days as I could. And it was the most peaceful, reset that I could do every day. It was awesome.
Wow, that's interesting. And it's, we talked to a lot of folks about at different stages of their transition from the military, and you're still in it. You're transitioning. Obviously, you have a very different path. I don't think there is a singular path or even a typical one for people getting out of the military nowadays. But you jumped right into this CEO role of this really cool organization. Have you felt any struggles at all? Do you miss your old job? Do you miss that identity as a SEAL officer?
Yeah, totally. I think something that's hard for guys in the military is defining themselves as, hey, I am a SEAL or I'm a Special Forces, instead of the, hey, that's my job. And so when I was in, those first couple years, young, immature, I was like, I'm a Navy SEAL, period. And then as I got a little more mature, I was like, you see the older guys that get off the train, if you will, and the train's going a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I need to start realizing this is my job and I will give it everything that I have, but my identity, first is in Christ, but then second is, myself as a person and who I am as a human. But my transition coming out of the Navy was, I wanted to go to a SEAL platoon. I ended up, unfortunately, we had a SEAL officer that committed suicide, so it kind of messed up the detailing, and they needed someone to go to Special Boat Team 22 in Stennis, Mississippi. At this time, my wife was pregnant, and I was like, you know what? As you know, as an officer, your operational window is small.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get back to a SEAL team, and that wasn't it. And so my wife was pregnant, and I was like, you know what? This is a good time to separate and move on. So I had a great off-ramp. I had 3 months of baby leave, which I know is new, probably unheard of in your generation.
Yeah. God dang it.
So, I had 3 months of baby leave, and backing up, I had, it was tough getting out. I had 3 06s call me personally. One was my current CO, one was my Commodore, and then another one I'd known from the past, and called me. I was like, hey, you need to stay in. Just do this job. It'll be okay. They called the detailer. I was like, hey, what can we do? And, there's nothing to do, kind of rocking a hard place. But, going in and sitting down with each of them and telling them, hey, I'm moving on. That was tough. It felt like I was disappointing my dad in a way.
There's usually the stages of grief, especially guys that, they want around. First of all, we need you, which is kind of interesting if you think about it in the military as a whole, in this giant machine. We really need this one guy, otherwise it's not going to work. It doesn't work like that. Doesn't it work like that?
No.
But it certainly feels that way, right?
Yeah.
So it's guilt, anger, and then kind of acceptance but disappointment at times.
Yeah.
And all of that doesn't feel so good.
No, it doesn't feel good at all. But that was hard. I remember sitting in their office and just like you talk about, the guilt or the shame, or letting someone down, especially guys with their reputations and what they've done in the teams. it meant a lot to me, and they've been great mentors then and now since I've been out.
But they let you skill bridge at least.
I had the best off ramp. So they let me finish SEAL officer assessment selection as the officer in charge. So I got to see one more summer of that go through. My kid was born in September. So I took from September to December to just be a dad and support my wife. Cool. It was awesome. I got to see my kid every day, and that was great. After that, I got to skill bridge for 4 months with that guy with Patriot High Performance Homes in Coronado. That was amazing. And then I had 2 months of terminal leave. So I had a great off-ramp. But those 2 weeks before I left Coronado, I cried more in that 2 weeks than I had ever.
Yeah.
And I remember my wife being like, do you want to reconsider this? Should we stay in? And that was so hard. And, I wasn't ready for that. I mentally was like, all right, I'm good. We're getting out. And to be crying in our living room was brutal.
Yeah. Well, I think you said something before about a deployment that ended abruptly. I think it's good to hear that you had time somewhat.
Yep.
And an off-ramp, right?
Yep.
And then there's other people, and I'm certainly not unique in that, but mine was very abrupt. I had no plans on changing careers.
Yeah.
And then it kind of became a choice that was out of my hands. Mm-hmm. And I still struggle with that, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Why did you choose to do that? Obviously it was a hard choice. It makes you emotional to think about it. It was emotional at the time, and obviously it's working out pretty damn well for you. But why? What was the catalyst for your decision at that point in your career?
Yeah, I'd always told my wife, hey, I don't want to have kids in the military. And my plan was to do a SEAL platoon and then, potentially carry on if there's it's something I could do operationally while still having a kid. But when there was that kind of fork in the road, I was like, you know what? I need to hang up kind of being the kid and having fun.
Yeah.
I loved it. The jump trips, being water, we got to do jet ski trips to Hawaii.
Oh man.
It was I had the best time in the SEAL teams. And I realized seeing my kid being born, I was like, okay, I made the right decision. And seeing my kid this morning before I drove out here, dude, so awesome. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. I would be bummed if I was gone 6 months out of the year training. And, there's obviously still stuff going on in the world that needs addressing, but in terms of the Iraq and Afghanistan, those aren't going on anymore. And I was like, okay, this feels right to get out. So.
Yeah, I think it's all valid, right? And to some of our earlier points, I guess, the waning of the GWAT, I don't know if some people say it's over, some people say it's just slowing down, whatever. It's not like it was as far as operational tempo for almost everybody in the military, right?
Yeah. So I'll be the first one to say, so I was able to go to Iraq twice, super fortunate, but didn't see any combat. And that's a timing thing. My chief got in, I think in 2004 and was got to see some awesome combat. And I think anyone in our profession, you train so hard and you get done with the workup and you're like, all right, let's go, let's do this. I want to test myself as a man. But I didn't get to see combat. We would, I went out a handful of times and we just, you'd wrap up an ISIS facilitator. You wouldn't really find anything. We'd turn them over to Iraqis and then they'd be out of prison a month later.
Yeah.
So that was my time in Iraq, which is way different than other people's. And I think it's something that I know my generation, I struggle with that personally. And I think a lot of people in my generation will, because my generation grew up with Lone Survivor, Chris Kyle, all these, stories of team guys getting after it and seeing it in the news. And it's okay, can't wait for my shot. It's being on, it's probably like being on a Super Bowl team and being that backup guy. And you're just I know I can do this. Let me get out there. So that's been hard. And I think that goes back to the identity piece of, hey, being a SEAL, Special Forces, that's my job. That's not who I am. And I know some people disagree with that 100%, but I think it's good to recognize that once you get out.
Well, I don't know if I disagree necessarily. I definitely was one of those people that identified with my work. But that makes it all the more that is the cause in part of all the challenges, right? And I think, you're obviously a step ahead of a lot of folks, and like you're saying, your generation, that it's just a timing thing. It has nothing to do with your skill or willingness to go see combat, but you're just the fact that you're talking about that publicly, most people don't even say that. They just imply because they're so uncomfortable with the fact that they didn't, even though it has nothing to do with, like, it's not their fault.
Right.
But there's problems that come from both. And we see that all the time here at Mission 43. I'm sure you see it at Higher Ground, because guys that, volunteer multiple times to get to these units, levels, whatever jobs, because they want to serve in that capacity for their country, and for whatever reason they don't get that chance, that causes problems, just like, situations in combat or combat exposure, trauma exposure cause problems as well.
Yeah.
And with the, the waning of the GWAT, whatever you want to call it, like, I think that is a factor. It's going to be an increasing factor as we move on. And also, I think that's another reason why it makes sense to include first responders. Like you said, they are where we were at 20 years ago with the lack of availability, with, not in all cases, but the difference too is those guys have, 40 to 50 year careers. They're not doing 20 and getting out.
Right.
In retirement.
Right.
So just the length and duration, the proximity to their homes and family of trauma exposure makes that kind of unique as well. And obviously our country's seeing some weird times and weird things, and law enforcement's kind of at the, I say, tip of the spear there, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they are.
Yeah.
100%. I would never want to be a cop,
yeah,
especially in some of these cities. I got the utmost respect for those guys, and they have to make choices every day and to protect their lives, but also to make sure they protect citizens. And that's got to be very tough. And, I think something that's hard, you probably saw the New York Times article that came out about SEALs and TBIs. I don't know if you've seen that. So TBIs, like, everyone, prior military, people that don't have experience, like, oh, like, what IED blast did you get blown up in?
Yeah.
And I think that was, like, I was talking to a buddy again last night who was giving me crap about, my wife and how we met, but he was in an IED blast in Afghanistan. And so, like, that in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, TBI. And then after thinking about it, like, we've both been exposed to blast in training.
Overpressure nonstop. That
are way worse than, what you experience, or can experience overseas if you don't see combat, like myself. Yeah. And so guys that don't see combat but still have these symptoms of TBI, it's really hard to almost, like, I don't want to say identify, but kind of identify as, like, I have a TBI, or I've been exposed to a bunch of blast trauma that's affected my relationships, that it's affected, my thought process and how I think. So for that generation, my generation that's coming through, to recognize, like, hey, I didn't get to see combat, but I might still have some brain injuries from the, the demo charges that we do in our concrete building of a house. And they're like, hey, just, the minimum safe distance was, like, get around the corner over there, and you feel like the inside of your brain rattle. So I just encourage those guys, my generation, to recognize, like, hey, you might have a TBI and it didn't come from something massive. Like, it could just be that you were in the teams for 10 years and every year you just got Carl G rounds and blast rounds, and encourage those guys to come out to programs like Higher Ground and get involved with Mission 43. And I think we offer therapeutic recreation for guys to separate. And, I was listening to your podcast and you were doing
a million years ago.
Like you said, I do my research. So you did hyperbarics, right?
I did.
In Pocatello.
I did. And then since then, we put veterans up in Sun Valley.
Yeah,
actually.
Sun Valley,
Yeah, the Sun Valley Hyperbaric facility, actually in Haley.
Yep.
With Phil Rainey and those guys up there. And they've been great partners. The first guy I got to put through was Brad Blair, who was a former 175 Ranger. Again, is exactly what you talked about. I mean, he had multiple deployments and saw a lot of combat, but he personally never experienced, like, an IED blast. Mm-hmm. But, you go on an op and you fire 6 Carl G rounds in 30 minutes, your brain changes. And then overpressure from repeated breaching charges, all these things, even just firing your own weapons, mortars, whether they're incoming or outgoing, like, there's a lot of overpressure that affects the brain in a lot of weird ways, right?
Yeah, 100%. We go back to a story. So we're going out, we went out on partner force intel, not good intel. So they're like, hey, there's a cave over here.
Solid.
And I was the loader for the Carl G gunner. And I was like, going through my pockets, and I was like, hey, bro, I forgot my ear pro. And so we had like little in-ear, for our comms. Dude. And I was like, hey, I'm going to tap you on the head, but, like, just count to 2 so I can cover my ears. So yeah, those blaster real. But, going back to the recreational therapy part, I remember hearing that, you did hyperbarics in Pocatello, and every day you said you'd go out and fly fish or fish. And that was, what was that experience like for you in terms of your thought process and all that?
I can tell you the exact moment. In fact, I just went back to this place a couple days ago. It's the first time I'm back there since 2019. But I was sitting next to the Portneuf River, and no one else was around. And before that, I was having real problems with my dexterity because of my brain injury. But it was the first time I got to tie a fly onto tippet, and it was like not even that fine of tippet. But first time I was able to do it because I was so shaky. And then that was my first moment of hope. It was kind of like, like looking through a scope and just seeing like all the stuff that had repeatedly been a source of frustration through all the therapies that I've been through. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it was just like taking a look up and being like, holy shit, perspective.
Yeah.
And that was my first moment of hope. So, like I've said before, like HBOT's not the silver bullet, but that's why Mission 43, we're so invested in it and we really believe in it. Hopefully you get in the chamber someday that we have now, whether it's up, in the Sun Valley Chamber or ours down here at the Idaho Fieldhouse campus with Summit Hyperbarics. But long story short, like we've seen it repeatedly for lots of different guys now have positive effects.
Yeah, definitely. I've met Mark. I don't know his last name, but he works at the Hyperbarics in Sun Valley. Yeah. Met him last night, and he's like, dude, come out. It's the best thing in the world. Mm-hmm. So I'll have to give it a try. Yeah. But, going back to, where your aperture kind of opened up when you were tying a fly. Yeah. We see that with guys that maybe thought, hey, I never could ski because they're a double amputee. And one of our employees, Matthew, double amputee, I think above the knee, and he rips in a sit ski. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so impressive. And to see him, like, he breaks, from what I've heard, he's broken a handful of skis just because he rips so hard. And to see that and like their aperture open up is so cool. Yeah. And then like we were talking about the Adaptive Training Foundation, mm-hmm. When they were doing the bikes, like one guy was missing an arm, and I thought it was so cool. I was like, hey, look, what's been the hardest part about not having an arm? He was like, dude, my mindset. Mm-hmm. But like once I changed it and seeing those guys, he's like, I can go mountain biking. And I'm like, yeah, you can go mountain biking and you're really good at it. It opens up their aperture and realize, I think it's a huge mindset shift of like, mm-hmm. you know what, I can take this mindset of learning to do something I never thought I could do and take it into my life and realize that I can accomplish a lot. So
I think it's fantastic. I know it's fantastic what you guys offer, the military, the adaptive athlete community, the first responder community. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a huge asset to have in this state, but you guys do things nationwide, right?
Yeah, we do. So nationwide, like I said, we have 27 events, and like we say, or what we like to say, is the best things in the best places. Mm-hmm. So we'll do everything from skiing, mountain biking, fly fishing, whitewater kayaking, rafting. We're all over the place, and we do them everywhere. Like, we just had rock climbing in New Hampshire, a mountain bike program in Arkansas.
That's awesome.
It's awesome, and our reach is awesome. And one of the cool aspects about High Ground is what's called CREW, and that's Community Resiliency Units. So those, we have 30 ambassadors. We're looking to get 35 by the end of this fiscal year. And those are people that have been through our program already that want to kind of spread what they learned at Higher Ground within their veteran first responder community. So they're across the country, and they go on like individual or multi-day kind of recreational therapy. So it's broadened our reach, and we've reached so far this fiscal year 500 veterans. Wow. Just through CREW alone. Wow. And it's been awesome. We have a great program manager his name's Adam. He's a prior Marine, and it's awesome to see it grow. That's just so cool.
That is really cool. And then a lot of those people that you're getting in touch with nationwide, are you bringing those people here to Idaho too, at least episodically, for some of these cool camps that you guys put on?
Yeah, definitely. So that's what we do. So you go online, you can fill out our intake form, and then you get thrown into our system. And as you know, taking a week off of work is really hard. Yeah. And it's a huge commitment of, some people that might only have 2 weeks a year. Like, do I really want to take 5 days and go out to Sun Valley? So that's where our CREW kind of kicks in. If someone can't take the full trip now, we're like, hey, let's put you in contact with our CREW ambassador to get you out doing some recreational therapy. And then if there's a time that makes sense for you to come out, we'll bring you out to Sun Valley or other places in the country to get you on a week-long program. Man,
that's awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here in Idaho, you and your family. I'm sure your son, how old is he now?
10 months.
Oh, God. So he doesn't even know how lucky he is yet, but he will
has
realize.
No idea. Yeah, he has no idea. It's been awesome.
Well, thank you for everything you've done for our country, and thank you for everything you're doing now for our state and just nationwide community of, military veterans, spouses. I'm so excited that you're with Higher Ground because I have such respect for Higher Ground and everything you guys do. And Kate Dobby and everyone before you has done such a great job, and now you're here and you're going to kill it.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's been great. And shout out to Kate. That's who I took over as the executive director, CEO. She's one of the hardest workers I've ever met, and I've met a lot of hard workers.
Yeah.
And she's done an amazing job getting Higher Ground to where it is, and she's still with us. For those that know, she's heading up our development, and super excited to have her focused 100% on development.
Well, thanks for being here. Don't be a stranger, and we'll hopefully host you guys at the Idaho Outdoor Fieldhouse, or you'll see Mission 43 coming up your way sooner and later and over again.
Yeah, perfect. Dan, thanks a lot. Good talking to you.
Thanks for joining us for the Mission 43 podcast. We hope you found it informative and helpful. If you have any questions or feedback, please comment below or email podcast@mission43.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date with new episodes. Be proud of your service, not defined by it. See you next time.